Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting for the Town of Los Gatos of May 12th, 2010. Before we get started, just a few comments. This is the Planning Commission. We are a body of volunteers who've been appointed by the Town Council to make land use decisions based on existing policies and ordinances in the town. And we appreciate everyone showing up tonight to be part of that process. If you do wish to speak tonight, we ask that you fill out a speaker card. They're on the benches in the audience, and there should be pencils there. If you could fill it out, even if you're an applicant, we ask that you fill one out and bring it up to the staff on my right. And at this time, I'd also ask if you have cell phones, if you could put them on silent or vibrate at this time. So with that, could we get started with the roll call?
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Erickson.
Here.
Commissioner Jensen.
Here.
Commissioner Machichi.
Here.
Commissioner Sayoc.
Here.
Chair Bourgeois.
Here.
And Commissioner Telesfor has an excused absence.
Thank you. So we do have a quorum. If everyone would stand and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first item we have to deal with tonight, we have two sets of minutes from our meeting of April 21st and April 28th. Do we have any comments, changes, or a motion on those two sets of minutes? Commissioner Erickson.
I will move adoption of the minutes of both April 21st and April 28th as distributed in the staff report.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Commissioner Machichi.
I'll second.
Okay. Seeing no additional comments or changes to the minutes, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Passes 6-0. Next, we have written communications. I would bring to everyone's attention that we do have a desk item that pertains to item number 3. We received, subsequent to the staff report going out, we received 2 letters of support, and I believe that's the only desk item we have. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. And if anyone needs additional time to read that before item 3, please let me know, and we'll take a pause. Next item is requested continuances, which we have none. And that brings us to our subcommittee reports. Have there been any subcommittee meetings since our last meeting? Okay, I have one, the General Plan Advisory Committee meeting. We met last Thursday, and for those of you in town that don't know, we are undergoing an update process of our general plan. The General Plan Advisory Committee met to discuss 2 of the 4 elements. We got through the environment sustainability element as well as the parks and recreation element, reviewing the comments and suggestions from the other commissions in town. So if anyone is interested in partaking in that process, I highly encourage you to check out our website. There are still opportunities for public input into the general plan for the town for 2020. Okay, seeing no other subcommittee reports. This brings us to the part of our meeting called verbal communications. If any member of the public wishes to address the commission on an item not on tonight's agenda, this is your time to do so. You have 3 minutes to speak on any topic you wish. I have no cards for verbal communication at this time. Does anyone wish to speak to the commission on an item not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move right along. We have nothing under our consent calendar or continued public hearings, so that brings us to item number 1 on our agenda, new public hearings. This is an architecture and site application and a conditional use permit for 14595 Clearview Drive. And can we have a staff report? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
I will
Jensen.
be recusing myself from this matter, as I previously informed the chair.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Jensen. We'll give Commissioner Jensen time to leave the chambers. Thank you. And with that, we will begin item number 1 with a report from staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The project site is located at 14595 Clearview Drive, south of Wedgwood Avenue and west of Clearview Drive. The site is surrounded by single-family residential properties. The applicant, La Rinconada Country Club, is requesting to demolish and rebuild 2 accessory buildings, as well as modify and upgrade the swimming pool and surrounding hardscape. The applicant is also requesting to modify their CUP to permit group fitness classes that would be available to members and their guests only. La Rinconada Country Club was annexed into the town of Los Gatos in 1989. The town issued the first conditional use permit for the club in 1988. Completion of the annexation process was a condition of approval. The country club is comprised of 3 parcels totaling 125 acres and currently contains a 28,435 square foot clubhouse, a 2,471 square foot recreation room and snack shack, swimming pool, 18-hole golf course, putting green, and driving range. During a public review process in 2003, a strong neighborhood concern in regards to the errant golf balls from the driving range and increased traffic were discussed and addressed by staff and the club through yearly reviews, membership awareness notices, and club staff training. The club has been holding the required annual neighborhood meetings, and the town has not received any comments or complaints in regards to the club since 2004. The 2 new structures and poolside improvements will replace the existing recreation building and snack shack. The buildings will match the existing clubhouse in both architectural style and materials. The proposed structures have maximum heights of 21 feet 3 inches for the fitness center and 15 feet 5 inches for the fitness studio. The fitness center will be set into the grade similar to the existing structure, and the new fitness studio will have a full basement that will be accessible from the rear and will be used primarily for both facilities and ground equipment storage. The town's consulting architect reviewed the plans and found the project to be well designed with style and attention to detail that is supportive of the main clubhouse. His only recommendation was to ensure that the window design be recessed and finished similar to that of the existing clubhouse. While not entirely clear on the plans, it is the intent of the applicant to match the window style of the clubhouse, and staff has included a condition of approval that this must be clearly addressed on the construction drawings. Due to the proximity of a creek located near the proposed area of construction, the application was reviewed by a biological consultant for verification of compliance with the town's adopted guidelines and standards for land use near streams. While the new fitness studio is proposed 5 feet from the top of the canyon edge, as stated in the attached report, the top of bank does not extend far from the bottom of the canyon floor. The consulting biologist found that the proposed development does comply with the town's adopted guidelines and standards for land use near streams, in that the site does not contain any riparian habitat, and the proposed improvements are well outside the required setbacks from the top of bank. The proposed development would require the removal of 15 trees, protected trees, including 5 Italian or Arizona cypress, 5 Modesto ash, and 5 Canary Island pine trees. The plans were reviewed by the consulting arborist, and the proposed tree removals were found to conform to the town code for removal and replacement. The site currently contains 192 parking spaces, and the existing buildings and uses require 142 spaces. The proposed application will require the removal of 14 on-site parking spaces, reducing that total to 178, while increasing the required parking by 5 spaces to a total of 148, providing an excess of 30 spaces to that required by the town code. The new facilities will not be open to the public and will be restricted to members and their guests. Consequently, the proposed improvements and modifications will not increase the number of daily trips for the country club. Staff has analyzed the applications and found that the proposed improvements will be in keeping with the design of the remodeled clubhouse and will enhance the overall look and design of the site. The location of the improvements will provide a significant buffer to the adjacent residences in distance, natural topography, and existing foliage. While the improvements proposed will reduce the on-site parking, the site will continue to provide significantly more parking than is required by town code. The improved fitness facilities and classes will only be available to members and their guests and will not increase the number of daily trips. The proposed application will allow the town's only golf course to complete the improvements begun with the expansion and remodel of the clubhouse in 2005, as well as allowing them to offer a more complete fitness and recreation package to its existing membership. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve architecture and site application S-09-073 and conditional use permit U-09-029, subject to the attached conditions. This completes staff's report. We are here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley, for that staff report. Does anyone, member of the commission at this time, have a question for staff? Commissioner Erickson?
just a point of information, although thank you for the report very much. It's excellent as always. Given there were no public comments, and given the history with the neighborhood, so I assume that they reached out to the neighbors and informed them, but there were no response from the neighborhood, as far as we know, to the proposed changes.
Staff has not heard any comments from the neighbors. It's a guess, but the applicant can speak to it. This proposal has been in their mindset for a while, and they had their last neighborhood meeting in January, early January of this year, so maybe it was discussed partially at that meeting, but the applicants can speak more to that.
And just to clarify that even further, this public meeting was noticed to residents within 500 feet?
Correct. Everyone within 300 feet of the extent of the entire property.
Entire property. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions of staff at this time? Seeing none, we're going to open up the public comment portion of the hearing. And the way this works is the applicant will get 5 minutes to make any opening statements, answer questions. Then any member of the public that wishes to speak and comment on that proposal will have 3 minutes. And the applicant will have 3 minutes again at the end to rebut anything that was stated during the public hearing. So I have 2 cards on this. Again, if any member of the public wishes to speak, please submit a card. And the applicant, I believe, is Mr. Bill Putterbaugh. So, yes, please. And when you get there, we ask that you state your name and address for the record.
I'm Bill Putterbaugh. My address is 183 Longmeadow Drive in Los Gatos, and I represent La Rinconada Country Club as I'm the project manager for having this built. I'm a member of the club.
And you have 5 minutes to give the presentation, or if you have any comments?
I agree with the staff report and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great, short and sweet. Do we have any questions of the applicant this time? I see no further questions, so thank you very much. I do have 1 card, and that's Mr. Sean Hebard. You'll have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Sean Hebard. My address is 2102 Almaden Road in San Jose. And I come here, I realize that it's not in your purview here, but we don't have a problem. I represent the Carpenters in Action. And we're a group of local carpenters concerned with preserving the area standard wages and benefits for our craft. And we don't have a problem with the project per se, but our problem is with the general contractor that we understand is going to be performing the work at the project. And we just wanted to voice in this public forum to Mr. Putterbaugh our concerns with the contractor, and to urge him and the La Rinconada Country Club to strongly encourage that contractor to hire only subcontractors that pay the area standard wages and benefits these gentlemen over here have worked so hard to establish and preserve over the years. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of the speaker? And just to clarify with staff, that's not something that this body has any jurisdiction over as relative to this proposal.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Putterbaugh, you have 3 minutes to make closing statements or rebut if you wish to comment on anything you've heard. You don't have to, but...
I really have nothing to say.
Okay, why don't you just step up to the microphone and we'll see if any member of the commission has any questions. So, if you could restate that on the microphone for the record.
I don't really have any response to their concerns. We went through a normal process with general contractors, and the contractor we chose is a well-established, veteran contracting firm, and that's who we chose.
Okay, and no further closing remarks. I think Commissioner O'Donnell has a question for you.
I just have this one question because we talked about the neighbors. We have not heard from the neighbors I know in years gone by we did have some problems, but we haven't heard from them in years, which I assume means things are going well. But one of the questions was, did you have any conversations with your neighbors about this project?
Rick Forney is our general manager who held the meeting in January, and I think that was brought up at that time. Do you want to come up and talk to that, Rick? Okay.
And again, when you get to the microphone, please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Rick Forney, the general manager of La Rinconada Country Club. My address is 15150 Saratoga. Annually, I do conduct meetings with the neighbors. We did have our last meeting January the 3rd, I believe it was, and one of the topics was the fitness center. and the renovation of the swimming pool, which we discussed thoroughly. And basically there was, I believe, 3 neighbors in attendance, and none of them had any concerns about the project.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for the applicants? Seeing none, thank you very much. I'd like to close the public hearing portion of this hearing. And with that, I will turn it over to my commission for further questions of staff, comments, or a motion. I should remind you that we have 2 actions to take. We have an architecture and site application to demolish and then construct 2 new accessory buildings, and then also a conditional use permit that will allow group fitness classes. So those are the 2 actions we have before us tonight. Commissioner
I
Machici.
do have a question on a thing not relative to this thing, on the comments that were made. What position does the town take in reviewing the type of contract and whether certain standards are met? Do they have any?
They would have to just meet the requirements in terms of getting the building permit. We would not delve into the issues that were presented tonight.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So any comments on the merits of the proposal before us, or perhaps a motion? Commissioner Erickson.
Okay, I'll venture the motion. I would move to approve both conditional use permit U0929 and architectural site application S09073 to demolish and construct 2 new accessory structures near the existing pool and to modify the existing conditional use permit that allow group fitness classes at the La Rinconada Country Club, with the conditions of approval that are outlined in Exhibits 3 and 4 of the staff report. I can make the findings that, in support of the motion, that the project is categorically exempt pursuant to Sections 15303 and 15301 of the State Environmental Guidelines as adopted by the town, and make the findings for the change in the conditional use permit as outlined in the staff report, and also the required, and to support the architectural site application, the required considerations that are required under the town code to take action on approval of the demolition of and construction of the new building.
Thank you. So we have a motion to approve both. Do we have a second? Second. Commissioner Machici. Any further comments or amendments to the motion? All right. I'm going to go ahead and call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Passes 5-0 with Commissioner Telesfor absent and Commissioner Jensen recused. So thank you very much. Project's been approved. And we're going to take a 2-minute break and let Commissioner Jensen join us, and then we're going to start up shortly on item number 2. Before we start the meeting again, I'd like to remind everyone, if you wish to speak on an item, even if you're the applicant, we ask that you fill out a card and pass it to staff on our right. So if you're the applicant representing our project here tonight, we need you to fill out a card. Thank you. The cards are in the aisle. Yeah. Okay. We're going to get started again. Everyone's back, and we're on to item number 2. Item number 2 is architecture and site application and a conditional use permit for 15780 Los Gatos Boulevard, requesting approval to demolish a single-family residence and to construct a medical office building. And we'll start again with the staff report.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. The project site is located at the northeast corner of Los Gatos Boulevard and Farley Road. Commercial uses are located to the north, south, and west, and there is a single-family residential use located to the east. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing residence and construct a 1.5-story, 3,000-square-foot medical office building. Although the residential structure will not be replaced, the property is zoned highway commercial and designated as mixed-use commercial in the general plan. The medical office use is consistent with the zoning district and the general plan designation. Staff and the town's architectural consultant found that the proposed structure's architectural style is sympathetic to the nearby residential neighborhood. The architectural consultant made 4 recommendations. The applicant satisfied recommendations 2 and 4. The first recommendation is that the building width is decreased to allow a full eave overhang at the north side of the building. The applicant is proposing a 1-foot eave. The applicant stated that the building cannot be decreased in width due to the minimum room size requirements for that use. However, staff does believe that there are other areas within the floor plan that would allow the building to be reduced in width. We recommend that the applicant do so and provide a 3-foot overhang. If the commission concurs with staff, the commission should include the following condition with their approval. Building width. The building width shall be reduced at the time of building permit submittal to allow a full roof overhang at the north side of the structure, as recommended in the architectural consultant report prepared by the Cannon Design Group, dated as received March 26, 2010. The third recommendation is to remove the proposed faux shutters at the front entry and recess the front entry door. Staff believes the door should be recessed at least 1 foot to meet the recommendation of the architectural consultant. The applicant is amenable to increasing the door recess to 1 foot, and the requirement is included as a condition of approval. The medical office use requires 1 parking space per 250 square feet or 6 parking spaces for doctor, whichever is more restrictive. The 3,000 square foot structure requires 12 parking spaces. Based on the building square footage and proposed parking, the medical office use will be limited to a maximum of 2 doctors. The use will result in an additional 6 a.m. peak hour trips and 9 p.m. peak hour trips. The town's traffic impact policy allows the deciding body to approve a project with 5 to 19 a.m. or p.m. peak hour trips only if it is determined that the benefits of the project to the town outweigh the impact of increased traffic. The property owner has offered to contribute 2 public benches to be placed in front of a commercial building located at 21 and 23 West Main Street. Although the proposed location is not included on the town's maps indicating where public benches are needed, the town finds that the location is suitable for the proposed benches. If the commission believes the community benefit offered by the applicant is sufficient, the commission should include the condition found in the staff report regarding community benefit. The proposed use is consistent with the zoning district and general plan designation. The project will result in a commercial structure that respects the scale of the nearby residential neighborhood and contribute to the mix of available health services for the town. This concludes staff presentation, and staff is available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Savage, for the staff report. Do we have any questions of staff at this time? Commissioner Sayak.
Ms. Savage, thanks for your report. Remind me again, setbacks, are they required for commercial buildings? And the setback I'm specifically thinking of is on the northern side?
No setback is required for the commercial building on the northern side of the property. It is a side setback.
Okay. So no side setbacks in general for commercial?
If it's not adjacent to a residentially zoned property, correct.
Okay, thanks.
And Commissioner Erickson, you had your hand up as well, or was that your question? And I'll follow up on that. What about front setbacks?
Front setbacks are required in this particular zoning district, CH. A 15-foot front setback is required.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Okay. We're going to open the public hearing up and start with the applicant. And I believe Mr. Dave Flick, are you going to be representing the applicant? Mr. Spalding? Okay. Just so you know, I know I have separate cards. The applicant time is together. You won't have separate time. Just to make sure you're aware of that. Okay, great.
I showed up, so. I guess the only thing that, the main thing to speak about is the setback on the left side. We have 1 foot setback, and if the commission really feels it's necessary, we will take the 18 inches out of the reception area, but we're reluctant to do so because it's 11 feet wide now. That would make it 9.5 feet wide, and we're going to have patients waiting on each side of the room, so facing each other. And it's just kind of small for that patients that are already kind of nervous and trying to make it comfortable for them, before they go into surgery, or else they're the families waiting for the people coming out. So it'd be nice to keep it 11 feet wide.
That's sometimes caused by a cell phone or something that's up here, so if everybody could confirm they don't have a cell phone or a BlackBerry or something.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, I should also say that the part of this building that's very visible is the corner of Los Gatos Boulevard and Farley, and that the corner where the setback would be is not very visible, especially with the street trees and the trees we're planting. You just don't really focus on that corner. So I didn't see that was really an issue, but the town architect picked it up.
So is that the extent of your comments?
Yeah, you have questions?
Okay, sure. I think we're going to have some questions for you. Commissioner Erickson, saw your hand first.
So could you clarify what would be the likely average number of patients at any one time, and what the peak number of patients is likely to be?
You want to come up and you want to talk to the doctor directly on that?
That would be great if he could come up and introduce himself.
I'm Dr. Wes Emerson, 16101 Shannon Road, Los Gatos. First of all, I'd like to thank Jennifer and Sandy for making this a smooth process for us. I appreciate your hard work. To answer your question, it varies quite a bit. It could be as few as 1, could be as many as 8 people. My concern relative to what Chris said is that we have patients that have to fill out personal information in the reception area, and they need privacy to do that. We have patients that come in that are going to have surgery or just even a consultation, are often quite anxious. And then we also have patients that are post-operative who might have swelling or some bruising or something. So their privacy is important, and people tend to, in the reception waiting area, tend to sit kind of separated from each other so that they can have their own little space. So that's a premium area. The rest of the building, it'd be very difficult to take anything out of based upon what's included in the report. But the privacy of my patients is very important, and I'd like to have a spacious reception waiting area.
Yes, if you had a follow-up.
Final question. So in the letter which you submitted as part of the application, you indicated there would be 7, that you would move your 7 staff, full-time staff, and 1 part-time staff person from your present office. And if I understand correctly, the application would allow for 2 doctors. So if my math is correct, that's 10 people, correct?
Yes.
So part of my reason for asking the question about the number of patients has to do not with the waiting area, but has to do with the number of parking spaces, because it seems to me that with 2 doctors and 8 staff persons, 10 of the 12 parking spaces are gone. So I guess a reasonable question is, at any point in time, would there be likely to be 3 or more patients in the office?
3 more patients would be common in the office at one time.
Thank you.
And so just to clarify, those full-time staff members, they're all going to be there at the same time?
The schedule is very dynamic. We have, usually don't have patients on Monday morning. We have patients Monday afternoon, all day Tuesday. We have patients Wednesday morning, but not Wednesday afternoon. All day Thursday. We have patients Friday up to about 3 o'clock. The staff, everybody has a little different schedule based upon the needs, and so they come in a sort of a graduated manner and leave in a graduated manner.
But at some point during the workday, you will have 2 doctors and 8 staff people there?
There could be that many. That would be the peak.
With 3 or more patients being common?
Right.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Commissioner Jensen?
This isn't a question for you. I suspect it may be a question for Mr. Flick. But I'll just put it out there, and whoever is appropriate to answer. Assuming for a moment that one were to decide that the community benefit offered is not acceptable or sufficient, are there any alternate community benefits that you've discussed with staff, that staff has discussed with you, and that you're prepared to offer?
Well, I wasn't directly in those discussions, so I'll move that to, pass that on to Mr. Flick to answer.
Hello, Dave Flick, 130 Station Street. Yeah, I threw that in there because I thought it was pretty simple. And the building that we just renovated, the Sorensen building, was apparently missing the bench because the people that used to be there took the bench when they left and moved it down the street. And now there's no benches there. So as far as something that was simple, we came up with, we know what they cost, there's no design involved, they're missing, people have been asked about them. And we thought that was a pretty simple thing for something that's about to open that we're also involved in. So,
Are there any alternatives that you have in mind?
you know, I don't know of any other ones, but I mean, when you get into crosswalks and things like that, it's kind of a vague fun. And I think I, as well as the Emersons, would rather have something that's a little more tangible that we can actually see, and we know where it's going, and everybody can enjoy them. And we've done other things. We've done donations to parts of sidewalks, and it's all kind of vague. This is a little more obvious of what it is and where it is. We thought that was kind of, it's about the same price. I mean, the last one I did, it was the solar panels on the building itself were the community benefit of the building that I did on Roberts Road. And it's a similar value. And I think everybody likes them and everybody uses them, and we need a lot more of them, and then we won't have newspaper racks and things like that in their way. And, you know. Okay. Also, if I could speak one thing on the parking, I've been to Wes's office many times. I don't believe he's planning on his staff all parking in that parking lot. That's not the intention. It's mostly a visitor's parking lot.
Well,
discussed it already. I don't know if that got clear.
That begs the question, where would his staff park?
Well, a lot of them come to work together, and a lot of them come and go, but there's also other parking in the area.
So basically street parking is what you're saying?
Boulevard, down, yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, most of the time they keep it so that people coming and going can, which is very similar to the one on Roberts Road. They have staff also, but they don't park on site so that people coming and going to the business have parking space available. So.
Okay, Commissioner Sayoc, can I follow up?
Because it is adjacent to a residential neighborhood, could you just talk about the outreach or communications you may have with any adjacent residents?
The Emersons have walked the neighborhood and talked to people that were willing to talk with them and showed them plans and such. So.
And as a follow-up, were there any specific concerns that may have been identified during those discussions?
You know, I don't know. I wasn't involved in that. Did you? Put Wes back there.
Generally, everyone was quite supportive. The owner of the adjacent property where the hair salon is, Sam mentioned about his sign and our landscaping to be sure that his longtime customers can still see the sign. And I take that into account. That's an important issue for him. I'd also like to make another point relative to the cars, is that when I say there might be a certain number of people in the office, in the reception area within the office, when we do surgery, they have to have a ride, and we have family members. So numbers of people doesn't necessarily equate to numbers of cars. You might have 2 or 3 people together, of course. And I personally run to work, or ride my bike about half the time or more. So there's one less car. So I thought I'd bring up that point.
Thank you. Commissioner Erickson.
Sorry about that. Could I ask a clarifying question? So when you answered earlier that 3 or more patients would be common, were you including in that a non-patient who might be with a patient?
Well, it varies quite a bit. Most people...
I understand that, but the question, but this very specific question is are 3 or more patients, not including someone who might also, so a patient might be 12 years old, couldn't drive, so their parent might be with them, as an example. Counting that as one patient, is 3 or more patients common?
I think that's a pretty good number, 3 or 4, something in that range.
Just wanted to be sure that we were talking about the same person.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Flick indicated that apparently it was his belief that the staff would be largely or mostly parking off-site. I have not heard you say that. Is his understanding correct, or is that not correct?
Well, my intention is, first of all, to encourage them to reduce the numbers of cars by carpooling and those sort of things, and then to utilize our lot to keep the cars off the street when we don't have patients, which would be Monday morning, Wednesday afternoon, and Friday afternoon. And then beyond that, to be respectful of the neighborhood and try to utilize parking on the street as necessary in commercial areas, Los Gatos Boulevard primarily.
But there will be no spaces, for example, that say for patients only?
There will be 1 or 2. I haven't decided. Actually, it'll be the handicap parking spot. We need to have one that's reserved to take patients out the back door who have been sedated, and that's the one immediately next to the back door. That's important to me. Whether I do more than that, I haven't thought it through further.
Thank you.
Commissioner Machici.
Mine first is a question of staff. The requirement is a parking space for every 250 square feet or something, I think is the...
That's part of the equation, but the other half is 6 parking spaces per doctor. And you look at both of those, and based on whichever one is more restrictive, that would be the requirement.
Okay, and which one was more restrictive in this case?
They actually equated to be the same.
Oh, they did, okay. So they meet the requirement. So the town determines that it's an appropriate amount of parking spaces based on the staff they have and the square footage they have.
Parking is based either on the square footage or the number of doctors.
Oh, and that's it?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Commissioner O'Donnell.
The other question I guess I have, the staff and the town architects concerned about the roof overhang, and that they want 3 feet, and apparently to get 3 feet, your architect is suggesting you would have to cut away from the waiting room. And I guess one of the things I'm just going through my mind is if I understand correctly, and perhaps we should ask the architect to come back, or you may know, but I think he said the waiting room was only 11 feet wide. Can I get an answer on that? Because I'm concerned you're saying you would cut, the solution would be for a 3-foot overhang to cut the waiting room down, and I forget the exact measurement it would be cut down. I don't think it was 1 for 1. But I'm just wondering, in reviewing the possibility of this cut down, have you explored what kind of increase of overhang would not have a substantial effect on your waiting room? I'm just visualizing an 11-foot waiting room, which doesn't sound very big to begin with. So whether it's you or whether it's your architect, I'd like to know what considerations you've given to, for example, extending the overhang to less than 3 feet but more than it presently is, and where does this all fit in? Because this, I have to say that initially it's not our problem that the lot is too small to support what the requirement is. So what we're being asked to do is to take into consideration something that we really don't have to take into consideration. But we might, so I need some help.
Well, let me just say, I believe Chris has at least once modified the overhang, and I'll let him answer that.
Yeah, the overhang question is, when you look at the top left elevation, it's the left side of the building. Where we have a 1 foot overhang, we have 3 feet elsewhere. So to make them all equal, we'd have to take 2 full feet out of the building. So to do that, what we'd probably do is cut the eaves back to 2.5 feet all the way around the building, and then take 18 inches out of the building, out of the reception area. And that's really our only option, to keep that eave. Now, I didn't do that initially because I didn't think it was a significant issue with how the building looks, and I still don't think it is.
If you do that, what will the width of the waiting room be?
9.5.
Okay. Thank you.
If I could get a little clarification on that, because you just said take it out of the reception area, and it looks like on the drawing, the reception and the waiting room are separate.
Well, if you look at our floor plan, the right-hand side of the building is all the exam room, the surgeries. Those are, we have minimum dimensions that we have to keep in those rooms, and they're right at the minimum right now. Then we have a stairway, which is right at the minimum dimension. We have a hallway, which I can actually take 7 inches out of that hallway by eliminating the door to the break room, so that I don't have to have the handicap strike edge distance. Then the toilet rooms, those are the absolute minimum toilet room size for the handicapped accessible. So that leaves me, the rest has to come out of that slice of building that's the reception and waiting room together.
Combined, okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Jensen, did I see your hand go up?
You did, but it's really a question for staff, so I don't know if you want to.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant at this time? So I should say I have no cards of anyone else that wishes to speak on this item, so now's your chance. If not, I will give the applicant a chance to make any concluding remarks, or we can...
Yeah, I want to make one more comment about the overhang. It's not really an overhang you're going to see. Typically on a zero lot line commercial property, they very rarely have an overhang of any type, and it's usually a firewall. That wall is completely blank and is up against a trellis of another building, and it's not something architecturally you're going to see. It isn't seen like it is in the picture. It's seen more like it is in the rendering. I don't know that I've ever built a commercial building that actually had an overhang on the firewall side of the property. It also leaves it so that the future expansion of the buildings down the street, which are also commercial zone, may also go zero lot. Will most likely go zero lot line right to the property line also, and then you've got kind of an overhang with a little space in between them, and that's kind of why they don't typically have overhangs on the blank wall of a commercial property. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any last questions? If not, sure.
Interesting comment. I've kind of come full circle with this overhang issue. When I first started this project, talking to Chris, I explained that I did my training in New Orleans, and my children were born there. We were married. My wife and I were married there, and I showed him pictures of Creole cottages, and they don't have an overhang. And I sent the pictures to my son, and he's an artist. He wrote back and showed me examples of how you don't have an overhang when you have buildings on either side of a Creole cottage in the French Quarter. When it's on the corner, they tend to have an overhang on the corner and not on the opposite side. So from an architectural standpoint, it kind of makes sense to me.
Okay, great. Thank you. And so with that, and seeing no further questions, I will close the public hearing portion, and I will turn it over to my commission for questions of staff, comments, and Commissioner Jensen.
My question is just one of clarification. As I understand it, the building that's proposed, regardless of whatever the size of the, forgetting this width of the overhang now, meets the setback requirements, meets the square footage requirements, meets any other kind of code requirements, correct?
Correct.
And the 3-foot overhang is simply a recommendation by the town consultant architect, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sayoc.
My question is more just background. I was reading the staff report, and it just occurred to me again. Originally, when it came to the commission and the council in '95. They just wanted to convert the original structure from residential to commercial, and that was denied. And it's the same purpose, but can you just briefly explain why it would be allowed this time to become a commercial project, whereas the findings weren't met previously?
Yes, the town code requires specific findings to be made for residential conversions. So that's in an instance where you're taking an existing residential structure and you're converting that structure to a commercial use. This is different in the fact that they're removing the residential structure that's on a commercial zone and they're actually constructing a new commercial structure. Because there is not the conversion of the residential structure occurring, the findings are not required at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner Erickson.
Several questions for staff, as I think Ms. Savage knows. So there's a property, commercial property across it faces onto Los Gatos Boulevard that is across Farley. Did you have an opportunity to research whether or not the number of parking spaces on that property is adequate by the town code, if there was a variance? And the reason why I'm asking is regularly people who use that facility park on both sides of Farley.
That property is in the county's jurisdiction. In the county, it is zoned office professional. Based on the parking calculations that the town would require for the office use and based on the parking requirements of the county, the site does meet the parking requirements. But again, it is in the county's jurisdiction.
Okay, question number 2. So the area of Farley Road, which is going east from the Los Gatos Boulevard, which the subject property is on the corner of, is actually a very dark area because there's a lot of tree coverage in that area, and there's no light on that. There's no street lighting on that side of the street. The street light that's at that intersection is on the southwest corner of the intersection. So this may be a question for you or potentially for Mr. Gaylord, do we know, is there any plans at all to adjust, not in conjunction necessarily with this project, but in general, to adjust the lighting in that intersection on the east side of the intersection?
East of the subject site, actually immediately south and east of the subject site, it's all county jurisdiction. So the town has no plans at this time to improve the lights. I can't speak for the county. If the properties were annexed into the town, certainly as the town code requires and allows, the streets would be upgraded to the town's requirements.
Question number 3. Did you have an opportunity to find out from the police department, is there any history of either excessive number of auto accidents in that area or pedestrian auto accidents in that intersection?
I do have the collision information for 2007, 2008, 2009, and so far in 2010. Just to go into recent history, in 2010 we've only had 1 so far. It's been a non-injury accident, and then we've had 4 total in 2009. So depending on what you consider significant, it doesn't seem to be significant.
Thank you.
Mr. Gaylord, did you wish to add to that?
Yeah, I can just add that the accidents in 2007 and 2008 were all during daylight hours as well. So there's no evidence that the darkness of the area is creating accidents, if that's a concern.
Great, thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
I just wanted to make a comment to my fellow commissioners because I'm kind of grappling with it myself. Normally, I would want to follow the recommendation of the town architect. On the other hand, when I listen to the reduction in the reception area, the waiting room area, that whole thing, mentally at least, I weigh in my mind what is the most valuable thing for the patients, most of whom I assume, or many of whom will be our citizens. And I've heard things this evening which I think make sense, and that is There is no magic to the 3 feet on that side of the building, and so the question then simply becomes, and I think Commissioner Jensen kind of hit it with her question too, if it is not a requirement, but is rather a perception, and I don't doubt our architect's judgment, but it doesn't necessarily mean on this we have to follow it. So I'm just, if anybody has any comments about how they feel as to the look of that side of the building versus the penalty to the use of the building, I might be helped by it.
Would anyone wish to comment on Commissioner O'Donnell's statement? Commissioner Erickson?
Yes, I was out on the subject property this afternoon and on the adjacent property this afternoon, and it seems reasonable to me that one wouldn't necessarily have the overhang and would actually push the building without the overhang. So I was persuaded by that argument that they made and by going back to the site this afternoon.
And I would like to add that I concur. I thought it odd, being out on the site today, if we did push it in a couple of feet, you'd create this odd no man's land that I think would be a maintenance nightmare to try and maintain a 2-foot wide strip between the property line and the building, especially when those are surgery rooms right there. So that seemed a bit odd to me as well. So moving on, Commissioner Machici.
Well, my only comment is that he's only recommending it. I mean, so I don't see it as a golden rule.
Right. So it seems like we're generating a little consensus on that item. But I do think there are other items that we need to talk about. I think community benefit would also be something I'd like to hear a little thoughts from my fellow commissioners on. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, I know Commissioner Jensen has taken a fairly strong position in the past about the concept, and I think that battle's been lost. But tonight, it raises community benefit to a new low level. If you follow that, it's almost silly. And as near as I can tell, Mr. Flick is giving himself 2 new benches, and that's the community benefit. I'm surprised if the other benches that were removed, or bench, I'm not sure what it was. What was it? Was it owned by the people who took it, or was it owned by the town, in which case it was theft? And what are we going to do with these things? I mean, I'd rather see the money contributed to the lighting, that, even though it's the county issue now, something a little more practical. And I have nothing against benches. It's nice. But in this particular case, it just seems so self-serving. On the other hand, I think the concept of public benefit, if it's reduced to this level, is so silly that I suppose I could say, why not?
Commissioner Jensen.
First, I have to respectfully disagree with Commissioner O'Donnell that the battle has been lost. And my issue is not the concept of the community benefit. My issue is that the benefit should have a nexus to the area being affected by the property. So if you develop a property and you cause traffic problems, you should fix the traffic problems. You shouldn't put LED lights on the bridge at East Main. So this project fits into my issue, which is I don't see a nexus between a medical building, which I'm otherwise perfectly in favor of and I don't have any objection to, but I can't find the benches in front of Mr. Flick's building are a community benefit that's appropriate in nexus to this particular project. If it was appropriate to put benches in front of this property, if it were appropriate to put lighting in front of this property, if the town has projects, which I disagree with, by the way, but I'm just saying, on a list that aren't here that they think ought to be taken care of at the same price that Mr. Flick is indicating for the benches, then that might be appropriate. But I have a real problem sitting here and finding for an otherwise perfectly acceptable and good project in my mind that 2 benches downtown are a community benefit conferred by this project.
Thank you. Commissioner Erickson.
Section 5A1 of the basic design guidelines, of the commercial design guidelines that apply to the boulevard, say in part that projects shall be designed to meet the functional needs but will be expected to reflect Los Gatos' unique qualities of small scale, and I would emphasize pedestrian friendliness and attention to architectural detail. So to the extent that benches would contribute to pedestrian friendliness, I would suggest if that were the community benefit that one might want to attempt to locate them in the general vicinity of the project so that they would in fact contribute in a positive way to the design guidelines for the boulevard that are in the commercial design guidelines.
Thank you, Commissioner Erickson. I think that's a good suggestion. Commissioner O'Donnell.
I want to say that I understand the nexus concept, and I don't disagree with the nexus concept, but it's clear to me that the town, at least the experiences I've had with it, hasn't bothered with the nexus. I'm not saying it should have ignored it, but that's what the town seems to do. And if the town, in fact, consistently ignores the nexus issue, which again I think they do, then we can be symbolic and say, darn it, you shouldn't be ignoring the nexus. But if you say, we're the Planning Commission, and in essence, the council can ignore nexus, I suppose, if they want to, unless some court tells them they can't, then I think we can ignore nexus. And if we do that, then we neither have to go where Mr. Erickson is logically suggesting, but we could do this. Neither one. Mr. Erickson's suggestion has the virtue of making some sense. Putting them downtown makes no sense. On the other hand, as near as I can tell, the town's policy is we're all for no sense as long as we get something out of it. And that's exactly what's happening here.
Well, and I think it's up to our discretion. I'm going to turn to staff for a second to what are our alternatives, because it's my understanding that we can't suggest community benefit projects. So if I'm getting the sense from the commission that we're not satisfied with the community benefit, what would be a suggested way to handle that in the motion?
You could either open the hearing again and call the applicant up, just have him offer some other types of community benefits. That would be the best solution.
I believe that question was asked, and we didn't get anything on the front end. Maybe they've had time to think about it. Are there other suggestions that?
That's the best one. You could throw out some examples of some benefits that other people have offered, and have the applicant consider those and come back up and discuss what they would like to offer.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Sayoc?
In previous projects we've had, when we've discussed community benefit, it's come to my understanding that we have an ongoing list of road improvements, traffic calming areas. Is there anything within the immediate vicinity of this project that we know of that just needs some money to get it funded?
I'll refer to Mr. Gaylord, but first, across the street, Placer Oaks Development, they contributed some money for traffic calming. I mean, this is somewhat near that vicinity. So if there was that offering, we could combine it with that benefit to improve that area.
Okay.
Mr. Gaylord?
I know that the town is currently going through some renovation to some of our existing town parks. Blossom Hill Park, I believe, is probably the last in the series. I know there are not funds adequate to complete all the improvements that they're looking to do. That could be a spot where some amount of money could be dedicated towards those improvements. I've also heard this evening that the lighting in the area is a potential concern. We haven't seen any real traffic impacts. There's no evidence to that fact. However, the boulevard in that area can also receive additional lighting if that was something that the commission felt was appropriate. So there's a couple of things that come to mind.
Commissioner Jensen.
Could I ask the chair perhaps to ask the doctor to come back up, or Mr. Flick, and address the question of whether a contribution in a cost equal to the cost of the benches would be acceptable, and/or since Dr. Emerson seems to be, he runs to work and he bikes, perhaps a contribution to the park would be something that he would think would be appropriate, and I wonder if they would consider those.
Okay, I'm going to reopen the public hearing for an answer to that question only. Mr. Flick.
Okay, to clarify the benches, they came up only because the same thing you're dealing with here. there is no projects to identify or set price on anything. The benches came up as an idea of something that was tangible. The address was then later added because Jennifer called and said, where are they going to go? And I said, well, they can't go on the county property. They don't qualify for a bus stop, so put them in downtown. She said, well, give me an address, so we gave them that address, because that's the only place I knew that didn't have them. Mr. Emerson would be glad to put that amount into a fund for any park, any trees, anything else that you guys want to do. It wasn't specifically benches. That was just what we came up with to fill the blank.
Commissioner Jensen.
And can you give us a ballpark on the cost for the benches so that we could do a condition potentially for a contribution?
We have an exact number. I think there's $100 for the two of them. Is that Jennifer knows?
Each bench is $2,101.35.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'll have the public hearing open. Okay, thank you. We're going to close the public hearing again. Commissioner Erickson.
So I'd like to return to the parking and what I would consider safety issues in the area. While I appreciate that the property across Farley is in the county, and I appreciate the fact that the properties that are adjacent to the subject property are also in the county, and that at some moment that Farley Road is in the county, it is a matter of personal observation that I make with some degree of frequency that there is a lot of parking on both sides of Farley for the people who frequent and use the professional building that is in the county property that's across the street. And they regularly cross that street. That particular Farley Road in that particular area is a major entrance to the residential area, albeit is not all in this town. It's in the county. That doesn't, however, I wouldn't think necessarily would exempt the town from contributing to what could be an unsafe condition if in fact we were to approve a use, an architectural site application, and approve a project and a use which appears to contribute to more parking on that road. And while certainly we might not be able to take into consideration the impact on the residential neighborhood in the county, it would seem to be not neighborly for the town of Los Gatos to contribute negatively to the neighborhood that was in the county. And so I guess I have both a neighbor relations concern if we approve something that appears to, by the information that the applicant provided, have a high degree of likelihood to increase the on-street parking on a street which is already regularly occupied from that whole block area from Los Gatos Boulevard on a regular basis by patrons of the other property. So to the extent they would add the people parking in that area and people cross at a number of, in a large portion of the year, it is very dark when they're at the end of the day, and so it creates, we may be contributing to an increased safety issue with respect to people crossing that street, and it is absolutely dark. There is no lighting in that area, unrelated to whose responsibility that it might be.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
If I recall correctly, we're talking about $4,200, something like that, or something
for the community benefit,
and to put the light, and 12 cents or whatever, and to put the light in the county, we would contribute that to the county if the county ever decides to put the lights in. So it seems to me that for the $4,000, we might want to put it into something we could use now. And something that would not require another jurisdiction to act. I agree with Mr. Erickson that it would be better if it could be done. However, again, the amount of money we're talking about, assuming we stayed, as Commissioner Jensen had suggested, at the same amount, which I agree with, it would seem not to get much bang for our buck at this time. And so the only thing I would say is I do think if we did contribute to the traffic calming projects, which are supposed to take place essentially across the street and down the block, that might get more immediate impact even onto the main thoroughfare, even though, well, the traffic calming could be more significant on a more immediate basis. So that's just some thoughts.
Commissioner Jensen, then Commissioner Erickson.
Commissioner Erickson may not be happy because I'm going to try a motion, if that's okay with the chair. I would like to move to approve architecture and site application S-10-005, 15780 Los Gatos Boulevard, requesting approval to demolish a single-family residence and construct a medical office building on property zone CH, application number 523-02-001. And in order to approve this application, the Commission would need to find that the project is categorically exempt pursuant to Section 15303 of the State Environmental Guidelines, and we have indication that it is indeed exempt. In order to approve a conditional use permit, we must decide that based on the evidence submitted at the hearing that the proposed uses of the property are essential or desirable to the public convenience or welfare, and that the use will contribute to commercial services available to the town. In this case, I think it's pretty clear that a surgical office for oral surgery is a benefit to the town and contributes to the welfare of the town. The proposed use will not impair the integrity or character of the zone. It will not, because the zone is a commercial zone. The proposed use will not be detrimental to public health, safety, or general welfare. I think that it will not be, despite Commissioner Erickson's concerns. Number one, we cannot, as Commissioner O'Donnell points out, legislate what the county does. This project meets all of the town of Los Gatos' requirements, including parking requirements, which we apply to every project that comes before us. There's no reason that this should have an exception. The proposed uses of the property are in harmony with the various elements and objectives of the general plan. That is true as contained in our staff report. And then we have to make a findings for demolition. We need to consider whether the town's housing stock will be reduced. It will not, because this residence has been used commercially for some time. It is not a historically or architecturally significant building. Obviously, the property owner does not wish to maintain the structure. Parenthetically, I don't understand why we make that finding, because every time you apply for demolition, clearly you don't want to keep the building. That aside, economic utility of the building or structure, as contained in our staff report, is no longer viable. And with respect to the community benefit, I would propose that in lieu of the condition that's presented to us on page 6 of our staff report, that we include a condition for community benefit that indicates that the applicant should provide a monetary benefit in the amount equivalent to the value of the benches that are being offered, which I understand is about $4,200, which should be contributed to traffic calming in the Placer Oaks area or to improvements to Boswell Park as the town decides, based on analysis, is the most appropriate for this particular use.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Commissioner O'Donnell. And Commissioner Jensen, I would just like to clarify that there was a recommendation in the staff report about the building width, and that is not included.
That is specifically not included. I think that we've had evidence at the hearing that the 3-foot overhang is not necessarily appropriate. It is simply a recommendation by the town's consulting architect, which I understand in our discussion we can decide to follow or not. And I think we've had reasons presented that it's not appropriate in this case.
Okay, great. Commissioner Erickson, you wish to make some comments?
Just for the record, I believe that, I assume that the right-of-way that is adjacent to this property is in the town, not in the county. So it's not clear to me that if we thought there was a need to put lighting on that, to provide better lighting at that intersection, that it could not be put on town right-of-way as opposed to county right-of-way. It could be put on the corner, which would put it diagonally across from the lighting that's on the southwest corner of that intersection. So with respect to Commissioner O'Donnell's comment and the part of the motion that I'm talking about, we wouldn't have the jurisdiction to direct lighting be put in the county. It doesn't seem to me that we would need to, that we could do that on town right away.
Since the motion was to kind of leave it up to the discretion of town, giving them a couple of options, would the maker of the motion be open to putting that as a third option?
Sure.
And the seconder?
Yes.
Okay, great. Any other comments? So we have a motion to approve. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes 6-0. Thank you. Does the commission need to take a break before we hit item 3?
I'd like to do the appeal rights first.
Okay, great.
This decision is appealable to the town council. There is a 10-day period to file the appeal. There is a fee, and the appeal forms are located upstairs in the town clerk's office.
Great. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 3. Item 3 is an architecture and site application and a conditional use permit for 320 Village Lane. The applicant is requesting to construct an addition to an existing restaurant and to modify a conditional use permit to operate full alcohol beverage service. And if we can start with a staff report.
I want to remind you that there is a desk item for this application this evening. The subject property is located in the Central Business District on the southeast side of Village Lane, approximately 450 feet south of Highway 9. Commercial uses are located to the north, south, and west. A town parking lot is located to the east, beyond which are residential and office uses. Manresa Restaurant currently operates in the existing building. The applicant is requesting approval to construct an addition to the existing restaurant and to modify the existing conditional use permit to allow full alcoholic beverage service. The chef and owner of the restaurant explained in his letter the purpose of the proposed project is to progress towards the goal of becoming the best restaurant in the United States and to obtain a 3rd Michelin star. The proposed addition uses a different architectural style than the existing structure. The applicant explains in their letter of justification that the proposed addition was carefully thought out and respects the small town character of Los Gatos. The project was reviewed by the architectural consultant. He concluded that the proposed addition is compatible with the existing building and the adjacent structures. The town has not traditionally favored additions that differ in architectural style from the existing buildings. However, the commercial design guidelines do support the proposed addition. The addition includes a bar and lounge area. The applicant's letter explains that this area will complement their existing meal service. It will be used as a service bar for the dining room and a lounge area to be used only by patrons receiving meal service. In addition to the change in alcoholic beverage service, the CUP modification will result in a reduction of the number of seats from a maximum of 112 to a maximum of 84. The site has 28 parking credits in the parking assessment district that provide the required number of parking spaces. Maximum hours of operation will remain the same, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week. The conditional use permit modification will enhance the services of an existing restaurant. The town received 2 public comments in support of the project. These are included in tonight's desk item. This concludes staff presentation, and staff is available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Savage. Do we have any questions of staff at this point? Seeing none, I believe I have 3 cards, all for the applicant, and I believe Amy Nunez. So you have 5 minutes to present.
My name is Cindy Sterry.
Ms. Sterry.
Sterry Architecture. My partner, Amy Noon, Sunny Hills Studio. We both are from Oakland, California. The first slide. David Kinch and the owners of Manresa opened their doors after extensive remodeling in 2002. Manresa has since received international acclaim. As a destination restaurant, Manresa draws a clientele to Los Gatos from all over the world, as well as from the Bay Area. Inspired by the vast bounty that California has to offer, David Kinch's culinary style is fostered by the sense of place that is the California coast. It is our desire that the design of this project and the quality of its construction pays homage to the natural beauty that make Los Gatos and the Santa Cruz Mountains the perfect setting for this unique dining destination. The intention of the proposed project is to contribute and enhance the atmosphere of the interior and the exterior of the existing restaurant. The owners are requesting a liquor license for digestifs and appropriate cocktails. The addition of a lounge will give guests a comfortable place to peruse the menu, helping to set the tone for the rest of the evening. The expansion is designed to be enjoyed exclusively by dinner guests and will complement everything Manresa has in place already. This picture shows the existing plan. This is Village Lane, which is the entry facade of Manresa. The greeting lobby is here, and beyond we have the front and back dining rooms. In the proposed design, we will be converting the back dining room into a lounge with a small bar. The proposed 277 square foot addition will house the tables displaced by the lounge. Future plans will expand the dining room into the existing courtyard, allowing space for a more gracious greeting lobby. The existing lobby will be converted into a wine room with a viewing window from the outside as guests make their way around to the new entry location. This view is the west elevation showing the entry to Manresa. These pictures were taken with the story pulls up, and as you can see, it is very hard to see the proposed addition. As we walk to the right of the entrance, we come to the south elevation of the restaurant. Again, no view of the story pulls can be seen from here either. Continuing to the right, we see the east elevation of the restaurant, which faces the town parking lot. The proposed addition is superimposed into it. The addition from the rear parking lot is in keeping with the scale and character of its surrounding context. We are proposing landscaping along the entire rear property. The future addition is designed to continue the same respect to scale. Careful attention is given to the breakdown of massing. In both scenarios, the addition blends in terms of color palette and scale, but is more modern, clean, and vertical in proportion than the nondescript style of this side of the existing restaurant. Continuing to the right, we enter the courtyard of the adjacent neighbor that shows the north elevation of the restaurant and proposed addition beyond the existing fence. The north wall of the addition facing the courtyard is 15 feet 9 inches high. We propose to create a landscape wall on this elevation with fast-growing screen trees. The architectural consultant report favors a green screen vine or high windows in lieu of the screen trees. We tend to comply with one of their options if necessary. Finished materials are an important part of the design. We pulled what we found the most beautiful in the existing building to use in our design. In this vein, we chose a vertical stained wood for the addition, which complements the natural palette of the existing structure. Guests of Manresa approach the building from one of the two parking lots that we have shown you. When they find their way to Manresa's entry courtyard, they know they are somewhere special. They can see a glimpse of the kitchen activity through one of the front windows, preparing for the dining experience that awaits them. It is our hope that this sense of entry begins as guests first glance the addition from the town parking lot. We hope that it starts a feeling of anticipation as guests journey around the building to the Village Lane entry courtyard. As they view the kitchen and later the wine room, we hope as they continue to turn the corner, they will then discover a surprisingly sophisticated and enchanting place. Manresa would appreciate your support in this endeavor.
Thank you. Right on time. Good timing. So do we have any questions of the applicant at this time? Commissioner Jensen.
Either one of you. I can't point to it where we have it in the staff report, but I somewhere gleaned the understanding that you intended for the addition to be green, so that you were going to construct it with using green architecture, green materials. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
Okay, and are you doing green building checklist? Are you doing LEED? What are you?
We're looking at the green building checklist. At this point, we aren't pursuing a LEED rating for it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sayoc.
Thanks for your presentation. I guess I'm just a little confused between proposed versus future. So what is before us and what we've studied in our staff report is just your proposed of the 277 square feet.
That's correct.
Is there a reason why you didn't combine your future, why you just didn't do one big revision versus a proposed and then a future?
Well, there's, the main reason is that it works in terms of phasing for the restaurant so that they can keep their operations open as much as possible. So this first phase involves building a separate dining room, which will not affect their operations. And then when that's complete, then we can break into the rest of the building, which involves the addition of a second 500-square-foot dining room. The second reason is that it works better in terms of working with the town fire code, which we have discussed with the fire marshal.
Okay. And then if I may,
Please.
The question then to staff, knowing that there's a future project coming up, is there anything that we need to keep in mind as we're reviewing this specific project?
You need to focus on this project, and assuming the second phase won't happen, but we did have to bifurcate the application for the reasons they had mentioned, mainly due to meet fire department requirements.
Commissioner O'Donnell, did you have your hand up?
I did. This may have been obvious, and to that extent I will apologize, but would you tell me again, I know what the present exterior materials are of the building, which I may, I'd characterize as somewhat like a slumstone or a concrete, I don't know what you would call it, but small pieces. Would you walk me through what the proposed exterior of the addition would be, and so how it ties in?
Right. So the existing masonry, that's the upper left, that's the facade that's existing now on the west elevation. What you see, the existing future fence, that's also in the front elevation. That fence is existing. Below the existing masonry is our proposed wood. The idea is to keep it sort of like a bleached wood. The other, right next to it to the right, the existing wood siding, that's part of the existing restaurant. And then below is, most of these materials are coming from the existing restaurant. The only other item is the proposed aluminum windows with the dark bronze finish. So the idea is to show you how those two proposed materials just blend with what's existing there.
My question, I guess, is most of the exterior is as shown in the upper left-hand corner, right?
Yeah, there's from the parking lot, it turns to stucco, but it's not what we thought was the most attractive material, so we didn't.
But just a more minor point, the 15-foot building addition will be clad, or the exterior will all be one material, is
Yes.
that right?
Yes,
Is
correct.
that material then the proposed smooth cedar finish? Or?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So it'll be a totally different material than the existing masonry.
But you can see that the existing structure is a composite of
I'm
both
not suggesting
the wood.
that's
yeah.
a bad thing. I just wanted to know if that's what's the case. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Erickson?
My sense is, not being an architect, but as a layperson, you did a terrific job with the design. But I have a curiosity question. You chose to use a different architectural style. Were there constraints? So, to a layperson, the most obvious thing would be to continue the same architectural style. So was that a design consideration? Was that a function consideration? Kind of why did you, it's more curiosity, why did you make that decision? Because that's not really addressed in the report. What's addressed in the report is how you vet the guidelines. I buy all that logic. It's just it seems to me the most obvious question. You would have used the same architectural style, so.
Yeah, that's a great question. That is the most obvious solution, and that is the one that we went to first. But we felt that it didn't meet the needs of the clients in a few different ways. Number one, we're trying to make this a more upscale architecture or building, and we feel that the facade that we're extending, which faces the back parking lot, is really very neutral, to be nice, and we didn't feel like an extension of that would be appropriate for Manresa Restaurant. And then looking at it from stylistically, also Manresa is a very sort of contemporary, innovative venue, and they've chosen to work with this existing structure, which is very traditional and bland. They did a great job remodeling it in 2002 by doing the faux finish on the masonry, which we see. But we were hoping, and they were hoping in this current remodel to bring it up to that next level in terms of design. And so both in terms of style and also in terms of the interior volume that we were looking for, we weren't able to continue the existing style in terms of design. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Not that this is material tonight, but more the other commissioners would tolerate this. So if in fact in the future, when Manresa, exceeds every other Michelin rating in the world in terms of quality, which I'm quite confident that they will, is there any been thought, given maybe you didn't do this as a part of this project, that you might extend the more contemporary style, the more upscale style to other parts of the building that are not being touched by this particular remodeling?
Well, the future project that we show a glimpse of does extend the same style across. And I guess you're asking if there was like a different owner in the future, might they extend the modern style, or?
Well, no. So you'll do this phase, the next phase.
Will match what we're doing now.
Right, yeah, but there'll be parts of the building, if I understand this correctly, that won't be touched at this time. So you'll have two different architectural styles. You could, in the future, extend the new architectural style to the other part of the existing building if part of what you were doing was trying to give the facility an upscale feeling that was consistent with the quality of the food and beverage being served.
With all due respect, I think we're getting a little too speculative here. I think this is not particularly germane to the application before us, so I think I'm going to cut off that line of questioning if you don't mind. Do we have any other questions for the applicant? I have one, and this might not be for the architect. This might be better suited to someone dealing with the operations of the restaurant, if there's someone present that can answer those questions. Part of what we're looking at tonight is to modify a CUP to allow full alcohol beverage service and the addition of a lounge. And in situations very similar to this, where we have a restaurant on the alley and we have the parking and then we have residential behind it, a lot of the complaints that we hear are dumping bottles into the garbage cans. I noticed where your trash receptacles are, and I'm assuming with the addition of full alcohol service and the addition of a lounge, you're probably going to have more bottles than you normally do. I'm just wondering if that's something you've thought through and how you're going to handle that as it pertains to potentially disturbing the neighbors with after 11 p.m. when you close, dumping all your bottles.
We'll introduce Jeff Bareilles from Manresa to answer that.
Hi. Jeff Bareilles, 1036 Trout Gulch, Aptos, California. I don't see our dumping of bottles in the particular location with the addition of the bar being any different than our existing bottle disposal situation. I don't see a great increase in bottle consumption. The modification of the license is to accommodate guest requests. There will be some additional revenue that comes with that, but it's really a response to our guest request.
And if I could follow up on that, what is your current procedure for dumping your bottles? Do you wait until the morning? Do you do it?
No bottles are dumped after 11 p.m.
And is that a policy?
That is a policy.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Jensen?
Just to follow up on your proposal, I understood from the presentation in the staff report that the lounge area you're proposing is intended for diners only?
Yes.
So if I didn't have a full dinner reservation, could I come in and get a drink and an hors d'oeuvre and sit at the bar, or would I have to have a dinner reservation?
You could. One could. But the seating will be very limited. Okay. So with between 4 to 6 seats at the bar, that would be the only opportunity for a person to walk in and sit down and have an appetizer and a cocktail.
But there will be an expectation that there's meal service?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Seeing none, thank you. I'll ask you to be seated, and we have a couple cards from members of the public. First up is Mr. Michael Burke.
I want to thank you for taking your Wednesday night to do this. I had some notes here, but I think you got a pretty easy decision here. I read the staff report, and I thought it was pretty enthusiastic behind this project with only some questions about the architecture. The consulting architect kind of looked at it. If you paraphrase, I think, from his second page, it's kind of like, well, looked at some different ideas. This is probably the best. I will say that this place is a real treasure. People from around the world know Los Gatos because of Manresa. They've heard of it. People come from around the world to visit this restaurant. When Chef Kinch was on Iron Chef America last year, I know for months after that they had special dinners, which was that course. People from around the country or farther were coming to just have that meal. I know we've met some people that were here in town and were staying in the local hotels to visit Manresa. I've lived in town my whole life, but I've only lived downtown for a little over 4 years. One of the true joys is to be able to walk to a nice restaurant for dinner. Manresa, in my opinion, is the best restaurant I've ever eaten at, and I've eaten at some good ones. And to have that 2 blocks from my home is a joy. I ask you to approve their request tonight without delay, and I hope it's unanimous, because, like I said, we got a treasure here. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none. Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. J.B. Wood.
Good evening, everyone. I'm J.B. Wood. I'm a minor investor in Manresa, a Los Gatos resident, and also the CEO of a technology company which happens to be based in San Diego. I can attest to the point that was just made. Even though we're based in San Diego, I literally get dozens of requests a year to have meetings in Los Gatos, not because they want to see me, but because they want to eat at Manresa. And they stay at the Toll House, and they have breakfast at Los Gatos Coffee Roasting Company. I think really the economic impact of this asset to the community is tremendous. I also want to make the point that the investors in Manresa, while Manresa has done tremendously in terms of international accolades and awards and PR, the restaurant has never been a huge profit producer, and in fact over the course of the years has had, like many restaurants, to struggle through some difficult and challenging times. The investors feel strongly that this addition will help ensure the financial stability of Manresa, not only as we pursue a 3rd Michelin star, but just to make sure that in good times and bad, we have all of our best offerings forward to make sure that Manresa is a lasting institution. I think on behalf of everybody in the community, especially on behalf of foodies, we are desperately concerned about making sure that this is a financially stable, long-term operation, and we think that this addition to the property will go a long way to ensuring that stability.
Thank you. Commissioner Sack has a question for you.
I'm not quite sure if it's directly related to architecture, but you mentioned the Michelin star rating, and in the staff report it talks about what's needed to gain the 3rd star, and it specifically says it doesn't take into consideration interior decoration, service quality, or table settings. So could you just explain how the renovation, in your mind, would directly impact?
I think some of these other folks are far more qualified to answer that than I am.
Well, perhaps you can address that in your closing statements. So, is there any other member of the public that wishes to speak at this time? Seeing none, the applicant now has 3 minutes to make closing remarks.
Well, I'd like to use the time to respond to your question. Although Michelin doesn't specifically state any criteria for a third star, historically, if you look at other Michelin-starred restaurants, they're all very well designed. They all have receiving areas. They all have a decor that is luxurious, and our design just falls in place with the existing Michelin restaurants. That's what we're responding to an example that's been said.
Thank you. You still have time if you wish to make any more closing statements. All right, seeing none, do we have any final questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. I will close the public hearing portion, and I will turn it over to the commission for questions of staff, comments, discussion, or a motion. Commissioner Jensen.
I have a question of staff. Since with respect to the alcohol, it's a recommendation to the town council, are we required to make findings for the conditional use permit or simply forward our recommendation to the town council?
You would recommend your findings to recommend to make a recommendation to town council.
Was that clear? Okay.
I got it.
Yeah. Took me a second. So any comments or Commissioner Jensen? I feel a motion coming on.
Okay, well, I'm going to try a motion. With respect to architecture and site application S-10-007 and conditional use permit -U-10-005, as I understand it, we can actually consider those separately. Is that correct? And that's correct?
Correct.
So would the chair prefer a combined motion or two motions?
Probably a combined motion.
Okay.
To keep it clean.
So my motion is to approve both the architecture and site application, well, to approve the architecture and site application and to recommend to the town council that it approve the conditional use permit application. And in support of those motions, first I would find that the project is categorically exempt pursuant to section 15301 of the State Environmental Code as adopted by the town with respect to CEQA. With respect to conditional use permit application, on architecture and site, I didn't find any required findings in the staff report. Are there somewhere that I'm missing them?
For the architecture and site application, you have considerations only.
And where might those be located? I was looking for them earlier. Oh, here we go. On page 3, I'm just seeing considerations that have to do with parking. As I understand from the staff report, the parking requirements have been met. And I also understand that the seating will be limited so that the parking requirements will be met with respect to that doubly. Is there a modification proposed to the sign? Because that's the second consideration, and I'm not aware of any, so I'm not going to make any finding with respect to that. There are new landscaping trees that are proposed along the new addition wall. We had the presentation of the slides with the screening trees. I think it's in our discretion to, again, reject or accept the recommendations of the town consulting architect, and I thought the screening trees were appropriate, actually, to the architecture. But I'm not an architect, but so I would not require any kind of lattice work or alternate landscaping. I think that there's been a demonstration that though the architecture is different than the existing building, it blends very well, and that the modern design is actually appropriate for a very eclectic neighborhood and does actually complement the existing building. And I don't really see any other considerations unless my fellow commissioners have something that I should point out other than that's contained in the testimony that we've had tonight. And I'd refer to the slide handout that we've had for evidence and also the presentation from the architects. With respect to the conditional use permit finding, the proposed use of the property is essential or desirable to the public convenience or welfare of the town and will contribute to the town's commercial services. It's desirable to the public, and the use will maintain a well-known Michelin star restaurant. I think all of that is true. We've had indications both by letter and by testimony tonight that the restaurant does present a valuable economic asset and otherwise an asset to the town that should be maintained. The proposed use will not impair the integrity and character of the zone. In fact, it's been existing in that location for some time. It would not be detrimental to public health, safety, or general welfare. And in that respect, I would address the town's alcohol policy, and Commissioner Bourgeois pointed out that normally we have issues with respect to trash, or we have issues with respect to neighbors objecting to loud people outside, or we have complaints from the police department regarding alcohol policy, or we have a question regarding whether alcohol will be served independent of food. The testimony tonight has been that we do not have any complaints, we do not have a trash problem, and surprisingly, when an alcohol policy is up for consideration, my experience in this commission is that there's always someone here to tell us not to do it, and there's no one here. So I think that's a testament that the management of the restaurant has been very good with respect to its alcohol. And the proposed uses of the property are in harmony with the various elements and objectives of the general plan, and I think that's indicated in our staff report and the testimony we've had tonight. So with respect to the conditional use permit, my motion is to recommend approval to the town council.
Great, thank you. So we have a motion for approval of architecture and site and a recommendation to the town council of approval for conditional use permit by Commissioner Jensen, second by Commissioner Matici. Any additional comments, questions, or discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Appeal rights.
The architecture and site application, that decision is appealable to the town council. There is a fee for filing the appeal, and the appeal must be filed within 10 days. The conditional use permit will be forwarded to town council for final action.
Thank you. We have no continued other business, so that brings us to new other business. Do we have a report from community development?
The only thing I'd like to report is last Monday night, the town council approved the Placer Oaks plan development. They did remove the Fiesta House out of the PD as an option, and they also commended the Planning Commission. They unanimously commended the Planning Commission. They very much appreciated your diligency in making sure the project. You had a lot of continuances with direction, and they said you put them in the right direction, and that you did a very good job, and they concurred with your actions.
Great. Good job, Commission. So lastly, we have commission matters, and everyone should have received a revised committee roster. I think we've already discussed the slight change to the commission roster at previous meetings, so shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone. And does anyone else have anything under commission matters? Seeing none, meeting's adjourned.